So at first glance for this, and what most people think when they see this information is this. Ramsay dies, check. Lady Stoneheart does not return, that is Sophie's lie. Arya checks 3 people off the list. That would be the Mountain, Cersei, and Walder Frey. Maisie's statements, Arya goes to Westeros, back over the sea, check, we know that's true. 2, Arya's in the trailer more times than people have realized because they don't realize it's her. That's probably true. And 3, Arya doesn't cross any more names off of her list. That's the one that's false. That's what everybody's thinking. That's what everybody's predicting. But I'm not so sure, and I'll tell you why. For it to work out so succinctly like that, that means the Mountain and Cersei have to die in King's Landing. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they're finished with their arcs. I don't think the Mountain's done enough. I know that Martin and D&D sometimes disappoint us. We want to see direwolves ripping people apart at least a couple times before they die, but then they kill them before they've really done anything, according to some fans. And I'm not saying that couldn't happen with the Mountain, but the problem is, one thing, there's a prophecy that Cersei is killed by the younger brother, the Valonqar. That's probably Jaime. Could be Tyrion, but Jaime is a couple minutes earlier, and it would be much more of a better twist if Jaime actually had to kill the person he loved at the end of the stories. But I don't think he's ready for that. Some people think he's ready for that. Some people think he's going to get back to King's Landing, see that Cersei has burned the whole city, and that's going to make him kill her just like he killed the Mad King. I don't think so. He stated over and over and over again that he will kill everybody to keep Cersei safe. All he cares about in this world is Cersei. He's got to hate her a little bit more before he can kill her. I don't think she could blow up the whole planet and he wouldn't kill her at this point, because he still is madly in love with her. She can do no wrong in his eyes. Second of all, what would you be left with in the Southern Kingdoms? What kind of story? Dorne? Marjorie? What is she, a 3rd book girl? The Queen of Thorns, what, she a 4th season, 4th book girl? These aren't main characters. They may be important side characters, but they're not main characters. There would literally be no more story in King's Landing or anywhere else that anybody cared about. Nothing to talk about down there. All we'd have is the Wall and Daenerys after that, if Cersei died. Every time we went back to a scene with Marjorie or Dorne, people would be like, oh, what are you even doing this for? It's not important to anything. Cersei and Jaime have been around for a long time. Now, there's a possibility where Cersei could die and make Jaime go on a rampage, but I don't really see that happening either. I think that we have to have a viewpoint in King's Landing. I think we have to have more intrigue there, more plot development. I think Cersei definitely is going to blow up the Sept of Baelor with the pyromancers in the season finale. It was alluded to at the very beginning of season 6, episode 9. Tyrion is telling Daenerys in the very first scene about the evils that the Mad King Aerys did when he tried to burn Bearpool alive. Now, they've been alluding to Arya's pyromancy all season. Bran's visions keeps showing the Wild King and his pyromancer storing this flammable substance. Several times you have Qyburn tell Cersei it's ready, there's more, and alluding to the use of this wildfire. The first scene of episode 9, you see Tyrion telling Daenerys about the wildfire and how he did this atrocity. This is all alluding to Cersei using that wildfire in the last episode of the season. But you didn't see anything about it in the previews, and I think that was for good reason. They built it up so much all over through the season for those who are really looking for it, and then when they don't show it in the previews for season 10, it makes everybody second guess themselves. And D&D and the HBO show have really gotten good at doing kind of things like this, building us up for a twist and then saying, oh no, it's not going to happen, by not showing us something in previews or not mentioning something. I think Cersei is going to blow up the Sept, but I think that's going to put her back in control. Not exactly how that's going to play out and everything, but I think that Cersei's basically going to win the fight in King's Landing, and she may become a true psychopathic villain after this. There's a leak that Tommen jumps out of a window. Doesn't mean that Tommen died, but a lot of people have been speculating that the reason he jumps out of that window is because he found out his true birth origins. I don't think so. I don't think that would make him commit suicide. Marjorie's death might make him commit suicide. Thinking that he had a part to play in the deaths of thousands by making a mistake and causing the pyromancy to go off, or causing his mother to blow up things, that might cause him to jump out of the window. And definitely Tommen has to die, because all of Cersei's children are prophesied to die, and this is the last one. Another thing is, in the very first book, Tommen and Rickon are paired off as sparring partners when they're playing out in the yard. Jon Snow doesn't get to fight in the first book, Game of Thrones, because he's a bastard, and it's not right in their society for bastards to fight nobleborn. So they have Robb Stark fight Joffrey, and of course Robb beats Joffrey, and they have Tommen and Rickon, I believe, fight. Rickon beats Tommen hands down. People who stay out of these fights are, of course, Arya, Sansa, Jon, and Bran, because Bran has just had an accident. And they seem to be the only ones who survived. The other two, Robb and Rickon, have died. So has Joffrey, and Tommen's about to die. Robb's and Joffrey's wedding were associated. They were in the same season, I believe. They also had similar circumstances. They both had to do with the wedding. Tommen's and Rickon's may be parallel as well. And I think that that early sparring scene tied their deaths and their fates together, let you know, or foreshadow that they would happen at the same time, or very near the same time. So I think you're going to see Tommen die within an episode of Rickon dying. Sparring partners finally met their end. The only survivors are those who weren't allowed to fight in that first sparring match back in Winterfell in the first book, first season, Game of Thrones. That could very well send Cersei off the edge if her son dies. It could make her into a true psychopath, maybe even hateful towards Jaime. And if that happens, then there's a much better possibility of Jaime getting to the point where he can see that she has to be killed. It will start him down that path. There's a prediction that Marjorie made when she was talking to Sansa. I think she was talking about a fashion faux pas or something totally not related to the High Septon. The High Septon, or the High Sparrow, wasn't even introduced yet, and she says that if she did something, she might wind up with a ring of dead sparrows around her neck. So I think that's going to happen this episode too. Ring of Dead Sparrows, Lancel, and all the Faith Militant are going to die. I don't think Marjorie is going to die. She could die in that sept. It could be the reason why Tommen jumps out of a window, but something tells me that Marjorie is probably going to survive, and the High Sparrow is probably going to survive too. Mainly because he's almost definitely, in my mind, Howland Reed, and he has a further part to play. We still have to reveal the fact that he's Howland Reed. What's Howland Reed going to do? Come in the last friggin' season after we've been talking about him since game 1? He's got to be in there somewhere. There has to be something going on with Howland Reed. And a lot of people think it's the Septon or the High Sparrow, and I think there's a lot of indications to that. Especially, he keeps making references to the old gods in disguise, and he's supposed to be a worshiper of the Seven. Howland Reed is a worshiper of the old gods. Many of his statements seem to favor the Starks as well as the old gods. What we've got to see is a lot of the story arcs ending in all these places to be poised in season 7 for Daenerys' arrival and the arrival of the White Walkers. And all these bickering factions have to somehow come together in order to fight the White Walkers. Daenerys has to join with whatever faction is in at King's Landing, and the Vale, and Dorne. The only way they're going to defeat the White Walkers is coming together. Marjorie and the Queen of Thorns just happily ruling all of Westeros except for Dorne and Winterlands until Daenerys arrives just isn't that interesting. So it's much more conducive to a good plot if Cersei and Jaime are in control there, and there's still a little bit of conflict going on between 3 or 4 factions when Daenerys shows up. And then instead of fighting, Tyrion and Varys and maybe Littlefinger somehow convince them to bury the hatchet and go help Jon and Sansa fight the White Walkers and save the day. That's what it seems like we're leading to.
So, what if Macy and Sophie have tricked us with wordplay once again, and both of their third statements are the false statements? How can that be? It seems contradictory, right? Well, not if Arya only checks one person off of her list. If Arya only checks Walder Frey off of her list, then she is telling a lie by saying that she checks no people off of her list. And Sansa is lying because Arya only checked one person off of her list instead of the 3 that was stated. And that would mean that both number 1 and number 2 on both accounts are true. As I've already said, we know that Sansa's number 1 is true because Ramsay's dead. We know that Arya's number 1 is true because she's headed back to Westeros, and that is conducive to the plot. We're pretty sure Arya's number 2 is correct also because she is probably going to be in disguise if we see her all on the next episode. She was never disguised as the Waif, as some of us theorize, but she may very well be in disguise at the Frey wedding. And if everything that I've said so far is true, it would imply that Sansa's second statement is true as well, that Lady Stoneheart returns. Now, how can that be? Some people have said that she's not on the casting call. Some people have said that she can't be here if Beric Dondarrion is here. Sandor the Hound Clegane even pissed in the river where she's found in the books, seemingly to add injury to insult towards the fandom. But as we've seen before, this book and this show like to get our hopes up for something, disappoint us, and then give us something even better at the end. How high would their rating soar if in the last scene of the last episode of Season 6 you see Lady Stoneheart? They've kept actors' involvement with the series secret before. They even did it They even did a pretty good job of keeping Kit Harington's hair a secret. It's never explicitly stated that Beric loses his life force because he gives it to Catelyn in the books. It's only assumed. And he still has time to die in the next season. And it makes me a little suspicious that Sophie Turner mentioned Lady Stoneheart. She is a fan of the books and even adopted one of the wolves. But would her handlers let her allude to something so... But still, Lady Stoneheart is an anti-hero more than she's a villain. And I think it's going to be very satisfying if she comes back and starts killing Freys and Lannisters in the Riverlands to some of the fans, if not all.
And one thing I want to address besides that, even if Cersei does become a true villain instead of just an anti-hero, and takes control of King's Landing and becomes this evil queen that everybody hates, I still think that there is going to be another big bad. I just don't think Cersei is as psychopathic and sicko as the kind of villains that we are used to hating in Game of Thrones, and which we need in Game of Thrones. Also, right about this time, only 2 seasons left, only 2 books left, we start craving a face to these White Walkers. We need to start hating them more too. So how is that going to be accomplished? I think that one of the personable big bads, a real psychopath that we can really hate, like Joffrey or Ramsay, is going to be associated somehow with these White Walkers to inspire more hatred towards us. A lot of people have in the past talked about Roose Bolton being a descendant of the White Walker or some kind of an undead entity. I think what we're steering toward is Euron as a big bad. Now in the books, the big bads, the psychopaths, the evils, the guy we love to hate gets worse with each upgrade. Joffrey's bad, but Ramsay's worse. And Euron is even worse than Ramsay, believe it or not. This guy is a lot like Ramsay, but he also uses magic in his torturing. He doesn't mind cutting out the tongue of his own lover. He's a child molester. He's raped his own brothers. He's killed his own brothers. And he's also done just about everything that Ramsay has done too. He likes the same kind of torture and the same kind of mind games, the same kind of playing with people. They haven't really brought Euron out in the series yet. A lot of people are unhappy with the casting for that character because he looks like a chubby, good-natured guy instead of this gaunt, evil, patched-eye sailor. Euron from the books has pale skin. He's got blue eyes. He's got a patch over his eye. That eye is black and evil-looking. And his lips are blue from drinking Shade of the Evening. The same thing that the warlocks of Korth used to drink, that Dany destroyed in the House of the Undying. He has imprisoned warlocks working for him. He's got a priest of R'hllor, I think, working for him. He studied magic. He practices black magic. Just like the warlocks, he drinks the Shade of the Evening. Or is his paleness, blue lips, and blue eyes have something to do with him being half undead? The guy sailed to Old Valyria. There's a few hints that he may have discovered the origins of grayscale there. The Iron Islands are associated with grayscale and have a long history of mythos with the grayscale, which we talk about in next week's season of Prehistoric Fiction or Fantasy is Game of Thrones Prehistoric Fiction. I hope you'll tune into that, check it out. But he's generally a bad guy and a very magic guy, and a guy who very well might be working for the Great Other, or the Faceless God, or the Stranger. Now, what if Euron puts a face on the White Walker's force? What if he's really associated with them? It turns out at the end, he either associated with them or gets defeated in a battle and then has to become a White Walker to survive, or worship the White Walkers. Maybe he will worship them, thinking that they're the incarnation of the Drowned God, because the Drowned God and the Great Other have a lot of possibilities. But I really see Euron becoming the most evil character in the books over the next 2 seasons. And also, I think that the evil that he presents will bring us closer to understanding and hating the White Walkers, or at least having the conflict with the White Walkers become more personal. So, in an act of desperation, Euron's going to join the side of the White Walkers, or something that he discovered in his travels all the way to Asai has caused him to already align with the Great Other. He said he is the Drowned God, and Drowned God has a lot of similarities with the Night's King and with the Great Other. So I think that Euron is going to be our resident psychopath in the next 2 seasons, and that he is also going to be somehow associated with the White Walkers and the Long Night. He has the Horn of Winter that is supposed to wake dragons, And like Benjen, he could be already half undead. Well, that's all we have time for this week on Fantasy or Prehistory, discussing Game of Thrones. We do have several other videos out this week. One of them is the second installment on my ongoing documentary about George R. R. Martin and his prehistoric fiction influences. Is Game of Thrones actually a prehistoric fiction novel? Just check right here and click on this link to see. We'll tell you all about it and show you all the parallels. Please subscribe. We'll have a breakdown of next week's episode as well as predictions for the next season. And if you like the song at the end of this video, I hope you'll click on it too. It's off of our latest album, Dr. Dan Matrazzo and the Losers, and there's a link that will bring you to the entire official video. Bye now, and I hope to see you next week.